I am joined by Dr. Richard Scott. Hello, Richard, my friend.
It's great to be back, Andy.
We've missed you. I really have. I have fun with the music when you're not here, but I prefer you.
Oh, you're too kind. Too kind. But it's
I
great to be
know.
back.
Now, let me start with this one. I've got no idea who asked this one, but when outside on a cold day for a substantial length of time, I usually get a runny nose. Why?
Yes, well, that's a very good question. That is a very good question, and clearly very common thing. I do too. Usually, you get increased blood supply to the nose, which then increases the amount of fluid that comes out of it. However, on a cold day, this is a bit odd. You'd expect less blood flow, certainly to the peripheries, and it may well be that as our hands and feet get colder, more blood flow goes to the core. So I'm guessing that there's more blood supply to the nose, and thus this is what happens. Plus, it's a protective effect. So when in very cold weather, it damages the nasal cilia. And one way to deal with that is for a body to provide fluid. So, for example, if you damage your knee, say you land awkwardly jumping out of the truck, what happens? Your knee swells, and that's a protective thing to say to the body, you've got a problem here. It helps to stop the knee doing more work because it hurts. So I think it's a protective thing as well as a response to increased blood supply in cold weather.
Having read that, I don't know who sent it, but I remember being a month ago when it was cold, and I suddenly found myself with runny nose, thinking, what did I do?
I'm answering this from first principles without actually knowing the exact answer. But those are the two things I think will be responsible. But you're quite right; it happens to most of us. You get a runny nose. Why in cold weather? I think mainly it's a protective thing.
Why do we need a wee in cold weather? This one always baffles me.
Why do we need to wee in cold weather? Hard to answer, isn't it? I'll have to say, without giving too many personal examples away, I need to wee in any weather. In cold weather, I don't know. I don't know why that is.
It's one of those things. I mean, having been outside, worked outside a lot, it's one of those things you just accept. Okay, it's going to have another week. It's gone cold.
I think it's perhaps the same as my first answer with the nose, which is in cold weather, your peripheries definitely get colder. The blood is shut down by the arteries constricting, and more blood is sent centrally to protect it from getting cold. Is a central organ. So I think if all the central organs are getting more blood, then they work slightly faster, and that's perhaps why in cold weather you tend to wee more.
There you go. Didn't expect that question to come up, did you? Right. What have you got for us today, sir?
Easter, as since we last met, which was actually 4 weeks ago, Easter's supervened. And it's I've been away and then I came back and it was wonderful to be in church on Easter Sunday. And of course, the Easter holidays now for the kids. And I've just had my grandchildren around. It reminds me that Easter is still on. Okay, the Easter Sunday is finished and Good Friday is finished, but Easter is still with us. And one of the things that struck me, our last song in our church on Easter Sunday was the very classic Tim Hughes song, The Greatest Day in History, which has been going about 20 years. Everybody, I would imagine, most people in churches will know that. And as I was leading the service, I was thinking, well, just imagine you weren't a Christian. What would you say the greatest day in, say, English or UK history was? Well, sportsmen might well say, when we won the World Cup in 1966. Actually, funny thing happened when I mentioned that in church, because I was leading the service. The musician behind me, who's from Indonesia, who was on the drums, did a sort of drum roll. Oh, England won the World Cup. And I couldn't help but turn round, because he's from Indonesia, and couldn't help but say, did Indonesia ever win the World Cup? I couldn't resist it. But some people might say, well, when England won the World Cup, or a bit more modern, Super Saturday in 2012 in the Olympics, or a bit more importantly, when we won the Second World War. These are all important days. But of course, the greatest day in history by far was Resurrection Sunday, when Jesus rose from the dead. And we've just celebrated that, haven't we? Sunday just gone. And of course, it reminded me that not only is Jesus the greatest man, and of course God as well in history, fully man, fully God. But what about other famous people who've been in the news? Because a lot of them, I don't know if you spotted, Andy, but a lot of famous Christians have been in the news recently, not least sportsmen. Perhaps I read the sport, but a lot of famous sportsmen have been speaking out about their faith. It seems to be more acceptable these days. So, for example, those of our listeners who get the Christianity magazine on the front cover in April are well-known Premiership footballers who are prominent Christians. I'm thinking of Eze from Arsenal, Saka from Arsenal, Semenyo and Gahey from Manchester City. 3 out of these 4 play regularly for England. Even better, another Arsenal player, Justin Timber from France, is known as Pastor in the dressing room. He must be really overt about his faith. I bet he's praying the whole time. But of course, last Saturday we saw the boat race. And in the women's event, one of the Oxford's team was a prominent Christian. There was a nice write-up in the Church Times about her. And her attitude, really shone through. Now, for sportsmen, especially if you bust a gut year after year trying to win the boat race and you keep losing, it's absolutely gutting because there's just one race, isn't there, in Oxford and Cambridge's boat race. And she had lost 3 races in a row, but she was staying on to do a sort of postgraduate degree in her 4th race. I'm very pleased to say she finally won for Oxford, first year in 10 years that they'd won. But she said this. She said, it's all about praying hard, working hard, and then she leaves the rest to God. And I thought, well, that's a good life example. Whatever we do in life, whether we're rowers or not, we work at a radio station, we work as doctors. Whatever we do, pray hard, work hard, and leave the rest to God. Now, I mention this because there's been some quite bad news in the press about Christianity recently, after the Bible Society's figures about the quiet revival were shown to be inaccurate. And of course, the humanists have made absolute hay on this. Christians saying that there's a revival when there isn't. You can imagine it, debunking the revival, causing mischief. But there's no doubt that something is stirring. More and more young men particularly come to church. Bible sales massively up. There's something happening, even though statistically we haven't yet proved it. And that's really good. And I just love the fact that alongside this, whether or not the Bible Society's numbers were right or not, we've got these Christians in the public eye speaking out at a time, the most important time in the Christian calendar. And then finally, Andy, I was just reading this yesterday online. There's a Scottish footballer called Ben Gammon Dowick. Strange name, small chap. I watched him once. He was right wing. He's very small and very nippy. Right wing for Scotland, playing football, and for Bournemouth. And he has taped on his wrist, and this has gone around 2.5 million Instagram followers for Bournemouth. He has taped on his wrist Joshua 1 and verse 9, which basically where God commands Joshua to be strong and courageous. Why? Because the Lord is with him wherever he goes. And the caption tagged a group called Ballers in God. I don't know whether you've contacted them yet, Andy. Christians in Sport, Ballers in God.
Ambassadors Football, yes. Ballers in God, not met them yet.
Ballers in God, that's worth contacting. And he's a member of Ballers in God, which is a worldwide movement providing a mentorship and helping footballers share how they live for Christ. Anyway, this young man, Ben Gammon Dowick, the right winger, spoke candidly about how his Christian faith had sustained him through every footballer's worst nightmare, which is injury. He'd had 3 operations in the last 3 years. I remember watching Scotland recently. He wasn't playing. And he had a serious injury to his hamstring, which as a sprinter, because he is a sprinter, is very serious. It's the big injury. And so he's missed the World Cup qualifiers for Scotland, although they've got through, and now hopes to be able to be fit for the actual World Cup itself, because well done Scotland, they're in it. But he said this: when I came to God, I started to feel a bit better and stronger, and I coped better. He said this: God is never going to abandon you. You know something positive was going to come of it. He was talking about his injury. Setbacks aren't setbacks anymore. It's just part of the plan. And this chap, Gammon Dowick, he said he believes that footballers are gaining confidence, being able to share their faith, having been blessed with a platform to do the right thing and to be good role models. So just at our time of great news for Christians generally, obviously Jesus dying on the cross is the most significant event ever. Just nice to see some footballers in the public eye, particularly sportsmen. But I might say, did you spot that one of the 4 astronauts in Artemis 2 is a Christian? He's got his Bible up there in space. So, one of the 4 astronauts is also a public Christian. So it's not just sportsmen. It's great that people are saying, hey, okay, this is really important and I can do it. And what's more, I'm going to do it. So a lesson for all of us who perhaps aren't so much in the public eye, but whatever we do, let's stand up for our faith and be counted.
Yeah, totally. I spotted the thing about Artemis too. I also remember reading something about when Neil Armstrong stood on the moon. Obviously, the bunch of astronauts went with him, and one of them, and this was cut out by NASA, had a communion cup and did communion. I think it was actually on the moon, which was a little bit extreme and awesome.
And there's something, I can't remember the phrase, but when they looked back at Earth from the moon, it was a real sense of, oh my goodness, there is something much bigger out there than ourselves. You know, when you're in that position, which not many of us will be, unless going to the moon becomes a more regular sort of commute. But wow, does it make you realise your tiny place in the big scheme of things, and who must have made all this? God Almighty. Mm.
It's the thing about the big stuff, isn't it? Because at one level, you can think, well, I'm so small, I'm insignificant, I don't matter, who cares? That's one perspective. Or you can think, you know, I'm pretty small in the world. The Bible talks about the mist of the morning that's gone. That's like our lifetime. It's not a depressing thing. It's just a good reality check of we're not here forever. We make an impact, but then there's somebody else and somebody else. But we either look at ourselves as only important because we're so small, or so small, but look at what God did anyway. I'm small, but hey, God still did all this stuff for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And if he knows and cares about every hair on our head, you just think, wow, how can the God that made this entire astonishing, unimaginably huge universe care about little old me and you? But he does, because he's God. Fantastic.
Joshua 1:9, I love that bit of scripture, be strong and courageous. It actually was repeated throughout the whole first chapter of Joshua. Be strong and courageous, be strong and very courageous as it goes on. And sorry?
Absolutely, be strong and very courageous.
Which is what I like. But I think there is an element of people... I'm sure I've had this conversation before, but I'm sure it's to do with the fact that a lot of footballers coming into the UK, they are less and less English, less and less British. They are more from foreign countries. I mean, okay, we know we've always had, you know, foreign footballers coming in, but I think with that there comes a confidence that they have because they're coming from countries where it's far more acceptable to Christian. I mean, this is a Christian country. It's signed in by law by a king in 1,000 years ago, whatever it was. So we are legally a Christian country. And yet I think there are many other nations where people are more confident about saying, yep, hey, look, I am a Christian. That's fine. Tough if you don't care. And with more of those coming in, I think that has got to be having a very positive effect on the UK generally, and obviously within football specifically.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's, yeah, we know we don't need the example necessarily of famous people to encourage us to share our faith, but in some ways there's a little part of us that is aware, because of the news and because of TV, etc., and media, we're aware of what's going on. And if somebody does happen to say, you know, to point up at to God when they come on the pitch, which they do regularly, or cross themselves, which footballers do all the time, or go on their knees, you know, it's just someone saying, hey, do you know, that's fantastic. Maybe I could do something along that. So we don't necessarily need it, but it's a help all the same, I think.
Now, I mentioned before we started this that I was in Trafalgar Square last week on Good Friday. I went to watch the performance of The Passion of Jesus, performed by Wintershall, their 15th at Trafalgar Square alone. And one of the things that struck me was when I was chatting to some of the people, because we got to interview some of the cast, that's why we were there, some of them said, well, this is me acting out my faith. I want to demonstrate I'm a Christian. This is one way. So they got dressed up, gave of their time, came to Trafalgar. One chap, he says, well, I'm not very religious, but I have sort of a faith, and, well, this matters because this is part of what I believe is important. And chatting to some folk, there were some folk of faith, some folk who were not of faith, equally felt this was an important thing to be a part of. And I think one of the things that struck me in light of what you're saying was people who wanted to be counted for the fact that, hey, I am a Christian, or for those who are not of faith saying, well, this matters. This is an important event. We need to remember this. And it was fascinating.
I hope they'll be touched by it. You know, how can you act in something like The Chosen or Wintershall and not be touched by it? You know, it is the greatest story ever told. And yeah, so I think we just need to keep praying for these actors, because once they become Christians, of course, you know, everything changes in their life, and they'll do a better job.
Yeah, totally agree. I think being able to say that you are a person of faith, I think matters. I think saying that one of my big things is I absolutely say I love Jesus Christ. It's the most normal thing in the world. I don't feel like I need to make a big song and dance about it because it's the most normal thing in the world to do so. And we've shared this before because I've shared this with you. A paper long ago was the Independent or the Telegraph, one of those. And it was talking about how children are born with a natural instinct of there is a higher power, a God of some sort. They may not have the great vocabulary, but they know that God exists, and then they go through the schooling system. Of course, that's kind of educated out of them, sadly. But there is this innate knowledge of the fact that there is something greater than us, and it's only a good thing if people can say, you know what, I am a person of faith, I am a Christian, I do believe in Jesus Christ, and I'm going to say so.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you say there, it shows the importance of teaching our children about Jesus, because there's something in there. Water the seed.
Absolutely, water the seed, carefully nurture it, it'll do its own thing. Richard, thank you. That it's an interesting one because if you stifle your faith, then you're stifling yourself. If you do that, that's never a good thing because then you're being dishonest to yourself and the people around you. It's almost at some point like lying. And the problem with lying, of course, is that eventually you're not quite sure where the truth is and you get very confused. It leads to all sorts of mental health issues because now up is down and left is grey and it gets all very messed up. But actually being true to the fact you are actually a Christian, in some ways it's hard. And we saw that again, coming back to the performance last week. The disciples ran off. They didn't want to be known. They were terrified and scared, and it will be hard because people will mock and they will ridicule you. But as one of my guests who I spoke to last week said, when I get to heaven and God said, what did you do in my name? Well, in 1 year, I was part of a production that proclaimed the fact that Jesus died and rose again to 35,000 people. She said, at least I'll have something to declare to God when I'm dead.
Yeah. Well, that's good, isn't it? Absolutely.
It truly is. Richard, thank you. If you've got any questions for Richard, you can send them through. Email hello@pure247radio.org. Hello@pure247radio.org. And I will put your questions through Dr. Richard Scott, my friend. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Andy. Good to speak again.
The very first edition of our brand new monthly magazine, By Men for Men, hits the streets from the 1st of May. Pure Men's Mag is go. We've pulled together the very best writers we could find, scouring the earth, looking high and low, which means we've done the hard work for you. All you have to do is grab yourself a subscription. We've got digital subscriptions available everywhere via our website, or a 6-month subscription of these high-quality, non-digital, tactile interfacing devices. They don't crash, they don't need updates, the battery's always at 100%. And even better, a brand new one appears every single month. Just head yourself over to www.puremensmag.com and grab yourself a copy. These are by men, for men, and always AI free. Pure Men's Mag is a go.